Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Xiuxia.
Thank you. Can you see my slides?
Yes, if you want to make them full screen.
Okay.
Yep,
so today,
good.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, David. So today I'm going to report our current progress on ADBKDB for tracking known and unknown mass spectral features in MDR, that's Metabolomics Workbench. And this work has been ongoing for a few years, and a number of students, postdocs, and faculty have worked on this project. And in particular, I would like to thank Yunfei and Alex on their hard work, especially Alex. He has been the architect of the ADBKDB infrastructure. In addition, we have worked with Shankar and Owen, and more closely last year than this year, to link the capabilities in ADBKDB with the Metabolomics Workbench. So we all know, especially from the talk given by Owen earlier today, MDR is a big data goldmine. It currently has data from more than 2,000 studies, and hundreds of the studies contain raw LCMS or GCMS metabolomics data. And we think unified secondary pre-processing of this raw data would facilitate data harmonization across different species, diseases, and sample sources. And this type of harmonization will involve multiple aspects. One is to track both known and unknown mass spectral features. And also we can use the data harmonization to prioritize unknown mass spectral features for compound identification. And in addition to that, we can also extract metabolic signatures across different studies and to help with establishing metabolome atlases. And finally, we can also use data across different studies, different instruments, different diseases to help build machine learning or artificial intelligence models for the eventual prediction of diseases and individual responses to drugs and diets. Okay. So to answer those questions or make it possible for data harmonization, ADBKDB was developed to harness the power of metabolomics big data. Here I'm showing the landing page of this cloud-based resource. And behind this resource is a computational workflow. Here I'm showing the steps in that computational workflow. Raw LCMS or GCMS data, here is only GC. Right now we have the LCMS capability as well. So raw data from Metabolomics Workbench are downloaded, pre-processed by ADBBig, and all the spectra are annotated, and some of them cannot be annotated. Both those annotated and unannotated spectra go through hierarchical clustering, and eventually those spectra that are in the same cluster and will go through a consensus spectral building process. So we find the best consensus spectrum to represent that cluster. And finally, all the results are deposited into the ADBKDB online portal. And this work has been published in Analytical Chemistry earlier last year, and you can try out on this website. And so far we have pre-processed and analyzed more than 100 studies. And among these studies that we have processed, here we can see the distribution of sample sources in the studies, distribution of species, diseases, chromatography, and mass instrument. This can give us an overview about what type of studies we have already processed. If we go into a little bit more detail to look at the consensus spectra that we have constructed, for example, here this is a particular consensus spectrum among close to 47,000 of them. And if we click, we can see all the original spectra that we have already extracted from various studies. And also we can see in this particular cluster what the distribution of sample sources and distribution of other tag values as well, like diseases, instruments, as I shown earlier. And we also can see the distribution of the sample sources for all the studies that we have processed. So this shows a comparison between the two distributions, and the differences between the two distributions was used for us to carry out the chi-squares test to provide a p-value, and we use that p-value to provide a quantitative information about how important this particular cluster of spectrum is. So in addition to extracting individual consensus spectrum, we have also been working on extracting metabolic signatures. Here, a signature refers to multiple significant metabolites that are associated with a particular disease or particular condition from the particular studies. And this workflow was constructed for this purpose. So raw data, either LC or GC data, are again pre-processed by ADBKDB, and the data goes through data pretreatment and then PLSDA discriminant analysis. From there, we could extract significant features. And after that, we also carry out cross-validation studies to provide statistical significance for different features. And in addition to that, those features also go through Xiuxia Li's Momichak analysis so that we can map them to metabolic pathways. So all of the results are deposited into the ADBKDB web portal. Here I'm showing the application of this workflow for two studies.
She communicate by email.
Yes, am I done?
No, you still have a little bit of time, Xiuxia. I think, Rick, you need to mute.
Okay, I'll be quick. And so we can link the results between ADBKDB and AMDR. So I'm just quickly going through. So as we are developing this infrastructure, and ADBKDB now has a capability to serve as a spectral search engine. So we can see users could search against not only the consensus spectrum, but also publicly available spectra as well. In addition to that, users could create their own private accounts and put their private libraries into their own account for library search. Here I'm showing the private account for the HERE program. You can see the libraries that are in the private account for HERE for search. And after the libraries are selected for search, user can upload their MSP files of spectra, visualize their spectra, search one particular spectrum against a library, or do a batch search. And finally, the results can be exported, and the results are color-coded for easier review by analysts. So as ADBKDB keeps growing, the number of spectra has been growing, so the search speed became an issue. So we have done some detailed investigation about approach to speed up the search, and that work was recently published just a few days ago in Metabolites. Thank you.
Thank you, Xiuxia. That was great as always. We do have a little bit of time for a couple questions for Xiuxia. Oliver?
Yeah, can you, thank you, Xiuxia, that's great. Can you highlight something that you found that was not published by the authors?
Yes, we have been trying to compare what we have found with the publications for those studies. For this particular study, I believe that's your data, study
Yes,
81 and 82. That's your data. When we look at the publication, there are some differences actually, especially when we're looking at the overlap of the compounds that we have annotated and those compounds reported on the Workbench website. So there are differences.
Okay, well, just send me an email. I'd be curious.
Okay. Thank you, Oliver. And I want to just point out how generous Oliver has always been. Whenever I reached out to him to ask for some data or some information, Oliver always provided. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Any other questions for Xiuxia? Xiuxia, you turn your camera on. Do you have a question?
Great talk, Xiuxia. So I appreciate that Oliver is very collaborative. My question is really how many Olivers are out there? If you look through the study of Workbench, how many studies are usable that way?
Good question. In our publication of ADBKDB last year, in the supporting information, we did list the reasons, various reasons why some of the studies cannot be automated, cannot be automatically processed. So there are a lot of studies that we could process, and then there are some studies that we could not process, especially those studies that were deposited into the workbench from early days. For example, the factory information was not provided, or the raw data we cannot convert to an open data format that we could process, various reasons. Does that answer your question, Xiuxia?
Yeah, thank you.
So do you have a feel for what percentage of the studies in Workbench are not really reusable?
Okay, I think Alex is here. Could you answer that question? Maybe he's not here. I don't have a quantitative percentage, but I could easily find out based on our record.
Yeah, I think just a rough guess, you know, is it 20%, half, 3/4? Do you have a gut feel?
I would guess maybe half. We downloaded hundreds of studies, but we could process so far without any concerns. Maybe right now is 100 some studies right now.
Yeah, we've changed our focus a lot. First of all, in the last 2 years, we require submitters to enter metadata for every single raw file so that we can match that to the metadata. And secondly, we're really pushing for open source formats, MZML, MZXML, CDF, because so many of our collaborators need that format. So those are the two areas that we've really been pushing over the last 2-3 years.
Yeah, well, and you know, just the field has come a long way since the very beginning of the Workbench. So I suspect that it is the more recent ones that are better, more usable.
Yes, that's what we have observed as well. Another prominent issue is the mismatch between the real sample name and what's given. So we cannot match them, the raw data and the sample info. That's another issue. But overall, we have really seen the improvement of Workbench over the years, and it's just a pleasure to work with the data as we moved forward in the past few years.
Good. All right. Thank you again, Xiuxia. And I think our final